Yashodanandana Prajajana Ranjana 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 Jamunatira Vanachari Jamunatira Vanachari Jai Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Prajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Prajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Prajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Prajajana Ranjana Jamunatira Vanachari Jamunatira Vanachari Jai Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gaura Premananda Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tadojjayamudirayet Nashtapraishva Bhadresho Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki Krishne Swadhamopagate Dharmajnanadhipisaha Kalaunashtatrishamisha Puranarko Dhunodita Grantaraj Shrimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Thank you. Hare Krishna. We're on Canto 3, Chapter 22, and Chapter 32, and the text is number 6. So kindly repeat. Nivritti dharma nirataha nirmamaha nirahankritaha swadharma aptena satvena parishuddhena Chetasa Nivritti Dharma Nirata Nirmama Nirahankrita Swadharma Aptena Satvena Parishuddhena Chetasa Nivritti Dharma Nirata Nirmama Nirahankrita Swadharmaptena satvena parishuddhena chetasa nivritti dharma nirata nirmama nirahankrita swadharmaptena satvena parishuddhena chetasa Naniti dharma nirata nirmama nirahankrita sadharma aptena satvena parishuddhena chetasa nivritti dharma nirata nirmama nirahankrita Sadharmaptena satvena parishuddhena chetasa nivritti dharma nirata nirmama nirahankrita sadharmaptena satvena parishuddhena chetasa. Ladies, anyone? Nivritti dharma nirata nirmama nirahankrita sadharmaptena satvena parishuddhena chetasa nivritti dharma nirata nirmama nirahankrita sadharmaptena satvena parishuddhena chetasa nivritti dharma. In religious activities for detachment, nirataha, constantly engaged, niramamaha, without a sense of proprietorship, nirahankritaha, without false egoism, swadharma, by one's own occupational duties, aptena, completely purified. Executed. Sattvena, by goodness. Parishuddhena, completely purified. Cetasa, by consciousness. By executing one's occupational duties, acting with detachment and without a sense of proprietorship or false egoism, one is posted in one's constitutional position by dint of complete purification of consciousness and by thus executing so-called material duties. He can easily enter into the kingdom of God. Please repeat. By executing one's occupational duties, acting with detachment, and without a sense of proprietorship or false egoism, one is posted in one's constitutional position by dint of complete purification of consciousness, and by thus executing so-called material duties, he can easily enter into the kingdom of God. Purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada, founder and Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Here the word nivritti dharma nirataha means constantly engaged in executing religious activities for detachment. There are two kinds of religious performances. One is called pravritti dharma, which means the religious activities performed by the grihamedhis for elevation to higher planets or for economic prosperity, the final aim of which is sense gratification. Every one of us who has come to this material world has the sense of overlordship. This is called pravritti. But the opposite type of religious performance, which is called nivritti, is to act for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Engaged in devotional service in Krishna consciousness, one has no proprietorship claim, nor is one situated in the false egoism of thinking that he is God or the Master. He always thinks himself the servant. That is the process of purifying consciousness. With pure consciousness only can one enter into the kingdom of God. Materialistic persons in their elevated condition can enter any one of the planets within this material world, but all are subjected to dissolution over and over again. Om Jnana Timanantasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadama Hyamban. What is it? Dadati Swapadantikam. Vandeham Shri Guroho Shri Yata Paragamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Ladata Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha. He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate. Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vancha Kalpatarubhishcha Kripa Sindhubhyavicha Paritanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Madgavira Bigopala Swikuryat Kripaya Yadi, Tadaiva Sampayaha Pitwa, Rishye Yustat Priyajanaha. My dear Lord Gopal, only if you accept my words as your cows will they provide milk to give pleasure to your pure devotees. Now, most of the commentators they connect this verse with the preceding one, text 5, and also the following one, text 7. So I'll just briefly share some of their comments on all of these, trying to focus on text 6. First of all, we may recall a couple of days ago, text 5 was Ye swadharman na duhyanti dhiraha kamartha hetave nisangan nyasta karamanaha prashantaha shuddha chetasaha. Those who are intelligent and are of purified consciousness are completely satisfied in Krishna consciousness. Freed from the modes of material nature, they do not act for sense gratification. Rather, they are situated in their own occupational duties and act as one is expected to act. And today's verse we said that by executing one's occupational duties, acting with detachment and without a sense of proprietorship or false egoism, one is posted in one's constitutional position by dint of complete purification of consciousness. And by thus executing so-called material duties, he can easily enter into the kingdom of God. Now, text 7, which somebody will speak and explain tomorrow. Surya dwarena te yanti purusham vishvatomukham paravaresham prakratim asyutpatyadta bhavanam. And that means, briefly, through the path of illumination, such liberated persons approach the complete personality of Godhead, who is the proprietor of the material and spiritual worlds, and is the supreme cause of their manifestation and dissolution. So, today's verse is very clearly stating what happens if you faithfully perform your prescribed occupational duties. Your prescribed occupational duties, because everybody has their own. Across the board, generally, everybody has to engage in dharma. But what kind of dharma? That's highly individualized by the Vedic literature itself. And therefore the word is used here, swadharma. One has one's own duty. You cannot perform another person's duty. This we hear from Krishna twice in Bhagavad-gita, and for good reasons. It's considered to be sinful activity, in fact. In Canto 7, Chapter 15, text 12 through 15 maybe, I don't remember exactly, but there it's described by Narad Muni to our Adi Guru, Narad Muni, in our Sampradaya, Narad Muni, to Maharaj Yudhishthir, 5 kinds of adharma. And one kind of adharma is to do somebody else's duty. That's what Arjuna was trying to do in the beginning of Bhagavad Gita, at least implicitly. So you can't do that. But if you do your own duty, and you do it for the right reasons, because this is what we heard yesterday. Somebody wants to milk their duty for all the sense gratification they can get out of it. Where have we heard an admonishment or a prohibition of this principle? In one of the most foundational passages of the Shrimad Bhagavatam, constantly quoted by Srila Prabhupada and others. Yes, exactly. Dharmasya hyepavargasya nartho thayo pakalpate narthasya dharmaikantasya kamo labhaya hi spritaha. all occupational engagements are certainly meant for ultimate liberation. Does that sound like what Srila Prabhupada has just explained in his purport? Nivritti. They should never be performed for material gain, and that is pravritti. These two are always separated. Furthermore, according to the sages, one who is engaged in the ultimate occupational service, that is to say bhakti yoga, he's using his occupational duties in that sense, should never use material gain to cultivate sense gratification. Because in case you haven't noticed yet, you will notice that by performing devotional service sincerely, for the right reasons, as we've been explaining, you get piety as a result. And piety always manifests in what form? Your own happiness. You become happy. You get sense gratification. In fact, in the Gopala Sahasranama, one of the Phalashrutis there says, there are so many of them, and we hear this in many other places, Vishnu Sahasranama also, and other things. If you chant this mantra, then so many that you'll get. You'll be popular amongst all the people. You'll go to heaven. You'll get, women will approach you unsolicited, and money will come, and even if you've lost it, it will come back, and so many things. So if one is only performing these activities because he's heard these phalashrutis and he's attracted by that, Prabhupada has said there are two ways that you can enjoy the results of pravritti marg. One is you're elevated to heaven, that's in the next life. The other one is that even in this life, you can get so much opportunity for sense gratification, but that opportunity must be reinvested in the process that got it to you in the first place. That requires detachment, and that's why we call it nivritti marga. So, that's the point of first canto, second chapter, text 9. Dharmasya hyapavargasya nartho taya upakalpate nartasya dharmaikantasya kamo labhaya hi sprita. You should only be concerned with nivritti marga, and anything that comes as a result of that, you should engage it back in the nivritti marga. In other words, you give it to Krishna. Give it back to Krishna, where it came from. This is the point. Okay, so this is an important consideration. It's really the essence of this passage as I see it. But it's interesting because in text 7, Prabhupada has translated it. Somebody may explain tomorrow that through the path of illumination, we approach the spiritual world. This is actually technical information, and Prabhupada has chosen not to dilate too much on the traditional understanding of this phrase, Surya Dwarena, because according to Baladev Vidyabhushana's commentary on Vedanta Sutra, what is his commentary called? Vedanta Sutra commentary? Anybody remember this history? Yeah, famous, Govinda Bhashya. And so there he describes that based on passages that we hear from, say, Chandogya Upanishad or Mundaka Upanishad, actually, a person who is completely freed from all material contamination goes back to Godhead, but doesn't necessarily go straight there. He goes through the sun planet. We might get distracted by hearing this. Presumably that's why Srila Prabhupada didn't really translate it as literally as others do, because we tend to get distracted by such technical information very easily. So let's just stick with Prabhupada's translation. By the path of illumination that comes through Krishna consciousness, we go back to Godhead. That's much better for us. All right, so let's see what some of the commentators have said here. Sridhar Swami has given his understanding here. He says, those devoid of the bhakti process gain this result only, stated in the 3 verses. As I said, the acharyas mostly group these, all 3 of them together, 5, 6, and 7. But those whose aim is fulfilling their desires don't take full advantage of the respective prescribed duties. Dharman na duhyanti. This is from text 5, which we heard the other day. Duhyanti. Dogdha, dogdhi. These words were used in that passage. What does it mean? To milk a cow. So we're supposed to milk the cow, and we're supposed to take that milk and offer that milk to Krishna. If we milk the cow and keep the milk for ourselves or sell the milk to get money for sense gratification, that's not good. So this is what he's saying. You should not perform your dharma, your swadharma, just for getting this material benefit, sense gratification. And that, even those, as the Bhagavatam we've heard, text 9 of the second chapter, says even whatever material sense gratification comes your way automatically, that also you should not try to enjoy that or get attached to it. You have to offer that to Krishna also. And this is the point here. So this is what it means to milk your prescribed duties, like you milking a cow. These prescribed duties can take you back to Godhead, and that's why Srila Prabhupada says in his translation here, so-called material occupational duties. They're not really material if you perform them with the proper spirit, and that proper spirit is described in this verse, text 6. It's a very, very important verse for that reason. Let's go through these qualifications again. What's the first one? Always engaged only in nivritti dharma, not pravritti dharma. That's the first thing. Second, nirmama. You have to do it without any selfish, sense of proprietorship. It's not mine. I'm not the result. And nirahankrita. You can't have the false ego that gives rise to that proprietorship. Swadharmaptena satvena parishuddhena cetasa. For those who know Sanskrit, you may have noticed this verse is actually not even a complete sentence. That's why we kind of have to join it to the next one. These are all just instrumentals, and it means that when your consciousness is completely purified and you're fixed in sattva guna by performing your prescribed duty in this spirit, then you go back to Godhead. That's the real result. Ante Gopala Charanam Prapnoti Parameshwari, it's been said by Lord Shiva. So, therefore Prabhupada says, by dint of complete purification and by thus executing so-called material duties, one can easily go back to the kingdom of Godhead. Alright, so Sridhar Swami says this, and the word nisanga, according to him, means unattached, referring to those whose actions are all offered to the Lord. Nisanga. It's interesting because I don't see the word nisanga in the verse. So he may be commenting on a different text. That sometimes happens. That's called padhandara. So he says nisanga anasaktaha. Nisanga means to be detached. All the actions should be given to Krishna. And then, that's for 5 and 6. And then for text 7, he says, Vishvatomukam paripurnam parusham yanti tathacha srutihi surya dvarena te virajaparyanti yatramritaha purusho hyavyayatma iti prakadamupadana karanam utpatyanta bhavanam nimitta karanam. So thus they go to the completely perfect person, Vishvatomukham. And this has Shruti reference, that's Mundaka Book 2, text 11. Surya Dwanina te viraja prayanti. They approach the viraja through the sun planet. Yatramrita purusho hyavyayatma. But the person has to be completely purified. And nature is the material cause, upadanam, and creation and destruction of the instrumental causes. Everybody know the difference between these two? These are technical, philosophical terms in Sanskrit. Upadana karan. There are two kinds of cause. Upadana means you've got matter to work with, clay. That's your upadana karanam for the pot. You make a pot out of clay, but no clay, no pot. Just like no bans, no bansuri. No bamboo, there's no bamboo flute. So, that's one thing. And then another kind of karana or cause is nimitta karana. That's the instrumental or the effect, the cause which is an effect of this matter. That's, for example, what the potter is. The potter is the one who makes the pot. So the cause of the pot is this person. No question about it. Just like Prabhupada said, without a driver, the car is not going anywhere. So he's the nimitta karana of the car. And the material elements such as metal and rubber and whatever, glass, everything that's in cars nowadays, plastic, that is the upadana karanam. All right, so he's saying, Sridhar Swami, he's saying that the Lord is the material cause of the universe and also the efficient cause. He's both. So he does it maybe through Brahma, right? There's two kinds of creation. What are they? The two kinds of material creation. Yeah, Sarga and Visarga. So the Sarga is a creation of this Mahatattva emanating from Lord Vishnu. And then the same Lord Vishnu in his Gunavatar is Lord Brahma. He puts all this stuff together and creates universes. So he's both kinds of cause. All right. So that's what he says about this. This is Sridhar Swami. Jiva Goswami in Krama Sandarbha says, these verses go together, 5 through 7, so he's another one who agrees. Such persons that we're talking about in these verses, they're very peaceful, prashantaha. Their intelligence is fixed in the Lord and they worship the Lord directly. Because some people worship the Lord indirectly. Krishna admits that as some kind of worship, but bhakti means to worship the Lord directly. And here Jiva Goswami is pointing out these are the people that we're talking about, at least in text 5. And then he goes on, they go back to Godhead by the path of the sun, since this is stated in the scriptures. However, in this case, they should go directly. But in any case, the result is the same. Somehow or other, go back to Godhead. However you go, it's your choice. But do not pass go, do not collect 100, for those who play Monopoly. This is the idea. You should not waste time. Don't get distracted by Svarga Loka. Don't get distracted by anything in this world. That's the point. So, Shruti also says, Surya Dwadena, same verse we've already quoted. That means, purified, they go via the sun planet to the place where the indestructible, immortal person resides. And that's, again, Mundaka Upanishad 2.11. Viraja, what does Viraja mean? Viraja. It's right in between the material world and the spiritual world. No man's land, you can say. So it's neither exactly the material world, neither is it a 100% spiritual world, but it means devoid of material influence here, Jiva Goswami says. That's his definition. In other words, that place is beyond matter. That's a fact. There, the immortal Purusha resides. This indicates the eternal nature. This is his commentary. And finally, Vishwanath Chakravarti explains here, having described sakama karma persons, Kapila Dev now describes nishkama karma practitioners. In other words, we've dealt with pravritti margis, now we're dealing with nivritti margis. And they don't desire the results of their actions, of dharma. Naduhanti. They don't bother milking, as it were, their prescribed duties for the pleasure that they produce. Instead, they reinvest in devotional service. They're unattached, therefore. Nissanga, he has the same reading. And they offer the results of their actions to the Lord. Nyasta karmanaha. This is described in text 5, which we've heard already. Now in 6 and 7, he says, gaining knowledge. How do they gain knowledge? We've been discussing it, but you have to have been listening to know. How do they get purified? Parishuddhena chetasa. Where does this come from? Swadharnamaptena. By sattvena. By performing their prescribed duties and thus coming to the level of sattva guna, that gives you the adhikar for jnana. Shankaracharya in his school, he does not admit students who have not completely graduated from the school of karma. That means to say dharma. Unless you've assimilated chapters, say 1 through 5 of Bhagavad-gita, there's no point in reading further. Well, there is point in reading further. At least hypothetically, we should know where we're going, and we should understand the philosophy. But the fact of the matter is that we will probably not realize much, unless and until the heart is purified by performing a prescribed duty, because reading between the lines of everything we've said so far this morning, the active ingredient of your prescribed duty is the selflessness and the surrender with which you're performing it. And that means bhakti. At least it means nivritti marga, but ideally it should be bhakti. So Jiva Goswami is kind of assuming all this here. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur also is explaining in the same way. This means they actually attain liberation. And what does Bhagavatam call the people who have not done that yet? Okay, yeah, we mentioned this the other day. Yeah, they're wasting their time, but what's their so-called liberation all about? What does Lord Brahma call it? Yeah, no, you're close. You're real warm, but not exactly that verse. Vimuktamani. They're proud of feeling themselves liberated, but they're not actually liberated yet. Because if you were liberated, you could embrace the process of devotional service with full enthusiasm. And you could remain detached from the sense gratification that comes your way as a result of that devotional service. What kind of happiness is that called? According to our more recent acharyas, like Bhaktivedanta Thakur and others. Anybody know this? If you've read, I think, maybe Harinam Chintamani, or maybe it's in Bhakti Alok or somewhere, he says. I mean, Jiva Goswami also describes in his commentaries and his works. Bhakti unmukhi sukriti, that's one way to say it. Piety that is produced as a result of performing bhakti. You get sense gratification. This is the point. It comes your way. You have to be ready for that. And don't be bewildered by it when it comes. We're bewildered even when a cell phone goes off. What to speak of when a beautiful woman walks into our proximity, or somebody offers you $1,000 out of nowhere. We get bewildered by these things. So, all right, so then he goes on to quote the same Shruti mantra from Mundaka Upanishad, that purified, they go via the sun planet to the place where the indestructible immortal person resides. That means they attain the Lord, who is the material cause of Prakriti, of the universe, and also the efficient cause, the one who affects creation and destruction of the planets and all that stuff. So this is the point. And again, we can't really emphasize enough, all occupational engagements are certainly meant for ultimate liberation. That's the whole point of this passage as I see it. They should never be performed for material gain. Furthermore, according to the sages, one who is engaged in the ultimate occupational service should never fall down. It means to say, if you're engaged in nivritti marga, if you're engaged in trying to cultivate pure devotional service, you should not grab that sense gratification that comes your way. Because it will. You will be tested. You will be tempted. But you have to instead remain Padma patram evambhasa, as Krishna says in Bhagavad-gita. Like a drop of water on a lotus leaf, the lotus leaf is not porous. Its waxy surface, nothing will get in there. That's how a devotee has to be in this world. Pankaja, lotus flowers, maybe he's rooted in the mud, just like us, but he pushes through the water. That is the process of bhakti purification. And he stands in the full sunshine, completely nourished, and thrives and blooms there. That's transcendence. So the lotus is, since time immemorial, an emblem of representing transcendence in general. So it's applicable here as well. All right. Furthermore, according to the sages, one who is engaged in the ultimate occupational service should never use material gain to cultivate sense gratification. I don't know if there's anything else to say about this verse, particularly text 6, because this is the gist of what our acharyas have said, but let's just quickly go through a few of the points in Prabhupada's purport. Of course, constantly in executing nivritti activities. Interesting here. You do not give up your prescribed duty just because you switch from the pravritti marg to the nivritti marg. Some schools will say that. One school will say that. Which school is that? Kevaladvaita, Shankaracharya. Yeah, he says just give it all up. It's all Maya. Brahma Satya Jagan Mithya. But actually that philosophy itself is Mithya. That's why we call it Mayavad, illusionism. It's meant only to bewilder us. You do not give up your prescribed duty under any circumstances. That's very clear from the 18th chapter of Bhagavad-gita, wherein Krishna says, Sarva dharman parityaja. Because the whole point of that instruction is to get Arjuna to fight, which is his prescribed duty. But that consciousness has to be elevated to the nivritti marga. Has to be purified by performance of duty to the sattva guna, where the jnana-adhikar is there. You can actually understand what is spirit, who am I as spirit, what is the nature of spirit, and then you can perform bhakti. That's also in chapter 18, who knows the verse? Param bhaktim brahmabhuta prasannatma na shochiti na kankshiti sama sarveshu bhuteshu mad bhaktim labhate. Param bhakti, Krishna says, the supreme bhakti. So this is the thing. You should elevate your consciousness through performing your prescribed duties only for the purpose of pleasing the Lord. This is the point. And then this is why Prabhupada is dilating on the difference between pravritti dharma and nivritti dharma. Pravritti dharma is also called Asuri Varnashrama by our acharyas. Asuri Varnashram, what does it mean? Demoniac Varnashram. That is the caste system. But what other kind of dharma, Varnashram dharma is there? They use another term, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Daivi Varnashram dharma. That is what the Vaishnavas practice. By that process, you become very quickly elevated because the nature of occupational duty is to purify the heart. It's austerity. It involves sacrifice, charity, austerity, and these things Krishna says again twice, never give them up. They purify even great souls. So even if you think you're vimuktamani, you think you're liberated, still you should perform your duty always. But for the right reason, not for the wrong reason. Only for the purpose of pleasing the Lord. This is the point. So, that's nivritti. So engaged in devotional service in Krishna consciousness, one has no proprietorship claim because we're giving everything to Krishna. That's very nicely stated by Krishna Das Kaviraj when he says, what is that? Bhukti mukti siddhi kami shakalaya shanta Krishna bhakta nishkama ataibo shanta. Devotee is completely detached from everything because he only cares about pleasing Krishna. He's not trying to please himself. So therefore there's no false egoism of thinking that he's God or the master. He always thinks himself as the servant, and servant means doing what the master wants. That is the process of purifying consciousness. You do not purify your consciousness except by embracing that principle, as difficult as it can be. That's what we have to do. So with pure consciousness only can one enter into the kingdom of God. Materialistic persons in their elevated condition. What condition is that? What is he talking about here? Materialistic persons in their elevated condition can enter any of the planets within this material world. What does it sound like to you? What does it mean? Huh? Yeah, demigods. That's how I see it. When you get really elevated in following your, maybe pravritti marg, Or, even Nivritti Marg, as I said, these things will tempt you. Krishna will offer you, maybe you want to go to heaven, and you have to be a little staunch when that opportunity comes. Look what Bali Maharaj did. That's why we worship him as one of our Mahajanas. We've never been in charge of the entire material creation like he was. Fir bhi, he gave it to Krishna. He gave it all up. That's why he's the exemplar of Atma Nivedana. He's surrender, sacrifice. So, we can, even if we do Abrahma Bhuvana Loka Punaravarti Norjana, Ityadi, Krishna says, even if you go to these planets still, they're all subject to dissolution over and over and over again. Bhutva bhutva praliyate. Again and again we heard the other day that we perform our dharma, we go up, we expend our karma, the good pious results, we come down again, we perform our dharma, we go up again, we go down again, up and down, up and down, up and down. Kalidas, the Sanskrit poet, he says it's like the spokes of a wheel, spinning very quickly. Sometimes you see cars, they have spokes. Have you seen that? Fancy cars, they have spokes sometimes. You can't even make out any individual spoke because one of them is a split second, it's on top, and the next split second it's on the bottom, spinning so fast. This is what we're doing in this world. Life after life after life. So recognize what a good fortune it is that we've come in contact with the transcendental books of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, the Bhaktivedanta purports. Finally, E Brahmanda Brahmite Kono Bhagyavan Jeev, that would be all of us. Kono Bhagyavan Jeev, Guru Krishna Prasade Pai Bhakti Lata Bij. And these books are the seed of our Bhakti Creeper. If we water by reading and hearing and chanting, etc., then gradually we will become Krishna conscious. And Krishna tells us, or Arjuna, through Arjuna, he tells us actually, that many people in the past have done this. You need not fear that you will not be successful. You will. It is guaranteed. Srila Prabhupada has guaranteed it. What does he say? You just follow these principles. You chant your 16 rounds, you read my books, take only prasadam, associate with devotees, you will go back to Godhead. In one lifetime you can do this. It is possible, but only by divine grace. So we should never forget that also. All right, there's a lot more to be said here, but I'm going to stop here. Anybody have any questions or any comments? Yes, Rabindranath Prabhu, all the way in the back.
So you were talking about swadharma. So how does a devotee know what their swadharma is?
That should be obvious by one's own qualifications, because Krishna says, guna karma vibhagasha. Your activities will show. The activities, of course, extend from your swabhava. Every swabhava in this world has its corresponding swadharma. All you have to do is follow the injunctions that are relevant for your swabhava. But because we have a tendency, we have a cheating propensity, and because we make mistakes and we fall in maya from time to time, or at least our senses and our intellects are imperfect, therefore we have to hear from authorities. We have to take guidance from a bona fide guru. He can help to guide us practically in our efforts to cultivate this nivritti dharma.
So just in our case, like Srila Prabhupada has so many disciples, and he didn't necessarily tell all his disciples, you do this, you do that, you do this, you do that.
Means he didn't give them personal instruction.
Yes, so how do you use one, in other words, are you saying that whatever is one's particularly good at, then one should do that for Krishna?
Sorry?
Are you saying, so in the case that you didn't get any personal instructions from Srila Prabhupada or your guru,
yeah,
should you just do those things that you're good at, but do them for Krishna?
Yeah, I mean, if need be, you can do that, but the ideal thing is that you work under those who are representing Prabhupada. He set up the system of the GBC and the temple presidents. We have this parallel lines they talk about, right? So, that's what Prabhupada liked that, actually.
Yeah, but
They
listen.
can give very, very relevant guidance. Not always, maybe. Sometimes, because conditioned souls. But, yeah,
But
that's the ideal.
So I understand. Like for the brahmacharis in the ashram, they're menial servants, and they like that. But let's say you're a householder, and you have to take care of your family, and it's basically okay. The temple management says, okay, you take care of your family. You have to do that. Just do it.
Yeah.
So in that situation, how does one understand what to do for Krishna?
I'm not sure I get your question. Yeah. So you perform you enthusiastically perform your grihastha dharma, but you should do it with a spirit of nivritti. This is the point. That's why Prabhupada said, give 50% of your income. That's a tall order, isn't it? But he said so. And our acharyas have given that example. At least we have to work towards that example. So.
Okay, thank you.
You're thinking of maybe in terms of ashrama dharma.
Yeah, I'm thinking of. Well,
I'm thinking in terms of varna dharma.
I'm thinking of varna.
Yeah, well, both. They both. A person who has the adhikar to engage in brahminical activity, it would be wrong for him to go out and get a job and waste his life. And I've seen that happen. So, on the other hand, the person who just is never going to get it, for him to try to artificially do something better than he's, more than he's able to do, it's also a waste of time. You should not do like that. Paradharma. This is paradharma. You have to do your own dharma. So it should be clear from your svabhava and from your, the guidance that you receive, if not from this bona fide spiritual master, from other Vaishnavas that you respect. We're never independent. This is the point. But sway adhikari yanishta sa guna parikirtita. This is what Krishna tells Uddhava. Ki whatever you have the qualification, the adhikar is a nice word, means prerogative to do. You should do that thing and that thing alone. Don't try for more than that. Do not settle for less than that. You have to be right on target. And that requires guidance. It does. So that's why we take shelter of senior Vaishnavas, more advanced association. It's 90% of our advancement. Sadhu Sangha, Sarva Shastric Hoy, Lava Matra Sadhu Sangha, Sarva Siddhi Hoy. This kind of siddhi also comes from Sadhu Sangha. Is it okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Another question here. Brigopati, you had a comment? Or? Maharaj, you want to add anything, please?
So even if we spoke a bit about detachment, even if one is performing their devotional service detached from sense gratification, is there any other part of the result that we should still be detached from?
Yes. You have to watch out for gyan also, right? The desire for liberation. Both of them have to be given up. He says, Rupa Goswami says, the two things, bhukti mukti spriha yavat pishachi hridi vardate. As long as these two are haunting you in your heart, they're like two witches. The desire for bhoga, material sense gratification, that's okay. You may be giving that up, but if there's a desire for liberation, that has to be erased as well, or engaged, better yet. So, these are the things. He says you cannot taste the happiness of bhakti if you're in the grasp of these two witches. That's one answer. I mean, there may be, depending on the subtlety involved in your answer, which I can't see, or in your question, that there may be other answers as well. Is that satisfactory? Yeah. Okay, so we'll stop here. Oh, one more. Shyam Chandrana? Kya? Okay. Thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.